Well, this should be wholly uncontroversial. Even when it doesn't work, nobody does it quite like Spike Lee. It's unavoidable and it shouldn't be avoided, and he in fact doesn't avoid, that he's mainly thought of as the premier Black American filmmaking voice of his generation, if not the entire late 20th and early 21st century Hollywood scene. But even regarded apart from his staggering individual historic significance, not that such separation is somehow necessary or appropriate, his contribution is vital and unique, and a one-of-a-kind voice as original and challenging as he's been outspoken and incendiary. Even when his films don't totally work as a cohesive whole, the result is almost always fascinating and worth seeing, simply just for how different they are. Now, part of that is that he's just a different voice to start with, an artist whose work is a constant clash between an outsider sensibility steeped in radical politics and his own personal story, and a deep reverence for classical sensibilities of old Hollywood and film history. But a bigger part, I've always thought, is that even by now, well-established fixture of the film landscape that he is, Spike's never stopped approaching every project like he thinks he might never get to make another movie, so he'd better get every idea in his head on screen and say every damn thing he wants to say right at that moment. So even his bad movies are packed with energy. Now, for example, there are two separate scenes in BLACKkKLANSMAN where characters attend lectures as part of the story, the kind of thing most films would do for atmosphere or communicate a few bits of relevant information. But this is a Spike Lee movie, and he thinks these lectures are worth hearing, so he's going to stop the movie for a bit and just let the speaker speak and do as much filmmaking around it as he can, so it's still technically part of the movie. These are the instincts that sometimes get you do the right thing, and other times get you Chirac, and this time it gets you a damn solid dramatization of an entertaining, if slightly too strange to be not true, story that's in many ways Lee's lightest and most accessible film since at least Inside Man. Right up until a climactic, oh by the way, gut punch designed to smash mainstream audiences in the face like nothing else is likely to do this year. Holy shit, you just kinda have to see it to understand. People will be mad about this one, you can bet on it. But for the most part, yeah, BLACKkKLANSMAN is almost a dark comedy, and very close to Lee doing something like his version of a buddy cop movie or a Tarantino-esque grindhouse tribute to the blaxploitation era, up to and including a scene where two characters engage in a back-and-forth exchange about the virtues of Shaft versus Superfly and Pam Grier versus Tamara Dobson. Officially, it's a semi-fictionalized biopic of Ron Stallworth based on the book by the same, here played by ex-UFL running back John David Washington, yes, son of Denzel Washington, focusing on his time as the first black police officer in Colorado Springs, Colorado, who in 1979 surreptitiously begins an undercover operation wherein he successfully impersonated via telephone a white man looking to join an emerging Ku Klux Klan chapter, and in partnership with a fellow white officer, here played by Adam Driver, acting the part in person, successfully ingratiated himself into the group to the extent that both men personally interacted with then Grand Wizard David Duke and helped expose the Klan affiliation of two dangerously high-ranking military officials. The film adds and expands on certain details in order to fit Stallworth's story, which, apart from the revelations about the two army guys, is more of a can you believe this is a thing that happened, we pull it off and you never heard about it observational thing than a detective thriller. Mainly by adding a romance storyline, a literal ticking bomb, expanded characterizations for the Klansmen the two Ryans find themselves interacting with, and Driver's character experiencing some unexpected awakenings of his long-lapsed connection to his Jewish roots from seeing real anti-Semitism up close and personal. All that, plus a very smooth score by the great Terence Blanchard and the imposition of a narrative arc about thwarting a specific secret scheme of the Klan, rather than a dig-until-you-find-something intelligence operation, all serve the broader goal of dressing BLACKkKLANSMAN up in the skin of a conventional three-act mismatch cops take down the bad guys movie, within which Lee and company can effectively smuggle a series of conversational set pieces in which police, Klansmen, black militants, politicians, and regular folks of many stripes engage in frank, enlightening, entertaining, and sometimes even funny back and forth on the subject of race and racism in a late 70s, early 80s context that none too suddenly can't help but remind us that the conversation and some of the real-life players involved are exactly the same 40 years later. Not only in the sense of David Duke, here played by That 70s Show's Topher Grace in a masterstroke of stunt casting, originating America First as a campaign catchphrase, all as a setup for a punchline wherein the film, and one gets the sense Lee himself, can turn to the audience at the very end and say, yeah, we've had some fun here, folks, but there's a reason I wanted to refresh you about the recent history of white supremacist terrorist groups in the United States. Just saying. If it sounds a touch on the unwieldy side, it is. This isn't really a story with a conventional Hollywood 3-act structure and ending, and trying to impose one on it halfway without tripping all the way over into outright fiction makes a somewhat awkward, almost dreamlike experience, that detached, genre-blending, remixed on-the-fly, unhinged structure that so often characterizes Lee's best and also most frustrating work. But when it sings, and whether fully cohesive or not, the police work sequences, the tense undercover scenes, the back and forth between Washington and Laura Harrier as his political activist love interest, and Grace's hilariously Weasley turn as young David Duke make it a seriously entertaining watch. I don't know that it's Lee's best film of late, but it's definitely the most compulsively watchable and packs the biggest wallop thanks to the ballsy left field finish. As an offbeat, here's some crazy stuff you won't believe happened, but yeah, it happened story. It's fun. As a decidedly Spike Lee flavored walk through American pop history, it's vital and raw, and as an experience, it finishes so strong you almost want to overlook that it doesn't totally crack not really having an ending to work with in the main story. 3 stars, sometimes being all over the map is a trip worth taking.